Hey, Marty here. Welcome to the Sublime to the Ridiculous Video Blog Edition. Me Grandpa Joe could do a lot of things that I just don't quite understand. I don't think many of us quite understood. A friend of his used to describe there were three ways of doing things: the right way, the wrong way, and the Cosgriff way. And I think, God bless him, that he had Grandpa Joe in mind with that. Now, Joe could do some very smart things. For example, he had to pick up my dad from the Opryland Hotel in Nashville, Tennessee one time when Dad was closing out a trade show and Joe was coming back from a trip out west to see some friends. And when Joe got into Nashville, he got himself all turned around as to where Opryland was. So, on this day before GPS or anything, he flagged down a cab and said, "Hey, take me to the Opryland Hotel. I'll follow you in my car. When you get me there, I'll pay you." And that's exactly what Joe did. And that's how he got to the Opryland Hotel to pick up me pops. And I do believe that was pretty clever of me Grandpa Joe. But as I said, there were things he did that I never quite saw the reason to. And I think a lot of people never quite saw the reason to. He went through a spell in the 70s and 80s. Maybe it lasted before that or began before that, but I only remember the 70s and 80s, where for the sake of keeping an engine running well for whatever reason, he would dump whole quarts of oil in the gas tanks of his cars and trucks. I mean, whole quarts. I remember being a teenager or being in my early 20s, and he'd give me quarts of oil and go around and put a quart of oil, a whole quart, into the gas tank of every vehicle he owned. Well, for those of you who are mechanically inclined, and for those of you who aren't, you'll know in a minute, you'll understand in a minute my point. What happens when you put a quart of oil in the gas tank is the oil gets burned as it goes through the engine. I mean, just like the gas gets burned, that's why your car runs. The oil gets burned, as it goes through the cylinders and everything. And in the case of oil, this would create thick clouds of gray smoke, coming from your engine. Now, if you're moving along on the freeway or something, it wasn't too bad and it would dissipate fairly quickly. But if you were in a confined area, that smoke would accumulate and become very, very cloud-like. And my brother Philip found this out the hard way. One day, after I'd literally dumped a quart of oil into our delivery truck, just like Joe instructed, Joe also decided it was time for Philip to learn how to drive a stick shift. So he sets Philip in the truck out in the alley by our shop, and he tells him just back up as far as you can, 100, 200 feet down the alley, then put it into forward and pull up until you got it by the shop, and get used to how the gears felt and how it felt to get the clutch and the gas timed, so that the vehicle would move. Not a bad idea, not a terrible idea in and of itself. But it developed a cloud. Or more to the point, a cloud developed around the truck so that me and this other guy that worked for Joe at the time, I'll call him Cloyce, just to give him a name, me and Cloyce are standing in the back door, the truck door of the shop, and we watch Phil back up slowly down the alley. And as he's backing up, this gray smoke from the oil burning off was billowing out of this Chevy flatbed truck and was forming a cloud around Phil. And Phil and the truck were literally disappearing into this cloud as it crept backwards away from the truck doors of our shop. And we'd hear the truck getting quieter and quieter, and then eventually we'd hear it stop, and we'd hear the grinding of gears, and Phil would come forward toward the shop, and would just explode out of this cloud. There were tufts of gray going everywhere, wisps of gray blowing every direction, as this old truck literally would explode out of the clouds toward our shop. And he'd get up by the truck door, me and Cloyce watching, and I think we were laughing. And then grind the gears until he got into reverse, and then start working the clutch and the gas, and he'd back up into an increasingly dense cloud of smoke until he got, down about 300 feet away. Then we'd hear him shifting gears again, and that truck would just explode out of this cloud. And it must have went on for about a half an hour, and I don't know what Phil thought. I can't imagine he could have seen anything. It was that thick. I can't understand to this day why some neighbors didn't call the fire department, because somebody had to have saw it, and somebody had to thought there was a fire back there somehow. But anyway, Joe thought it was a good idea to dump oil into the gas tanks of his vehicles, and this caused my brother Phil to have his head in the clouds while he was learning to drive a stick shift. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Please like, share, subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Comment in the comment menus. And until then, or until next time, this is Marty going from the sublime to the ridiculous. And I assure you, my head is not in the clouds right now.